Look who is now in Fortnite. As Nolan intended. What is up, everybody? Random Man here, bringing you my review for the 2026 version of The Odyssey in one take, serving as an adaptation of Homer's ancient Greek epic poem of the same name. The plot of this epic fantasy action film follows Odysseus, the king of Ithaca, and chronicles his journey, his long and perilous journey home after fighting in the Trojan War, and he encounters mythical beings and tries to get home to his wife, Penelope. Going into this movie, I was highly anticipating it. That is an understatement, actually. This was my most anticipated film of 2026 for two words and two words alone: Christopher Nolan. He is my favorite filmmaker. Ever since I saw The Dark Knight in theaters 18 years ago this weekend. Actually, today is the 18th anniversary of The Dark Knight on July 18th as I'm recording this. So it's this movie's golden birthday and it's old enough to vote. This movie single-handedly changed my perception of cinema. I always loved movies before this movie, but this film, on top of it having my favorite film performance of all time, with Heath Ledger's Joker being just something that totally blew me away, and the rest of the movie also blowing me away. I mean, I owe basically my passion for the art form to Christopher Nolan, and I have seen every single movie of his since The Dark Knight in theaters. And going back to just his most recent movie from 2023, Oppenheimer, not only was this my favorite movie from that year, but it's my current favorite movie of the decade. And it finally earned Christopher Nolan his Best Director Oscar and a Best Picture Oscar, on top of winning 5 other Academy Awards that night. And this man really is someone who is a big supporter of cinema. He himself is a big just supporter of cinema and lover of cinema, and trying to keep the art form up, and everything from his non-linear storytelling, his dedication to practicality in films, so much. I'm going to be rambling on here. But in any sense, this being his most ambitious movie to date in adapting Homer's Odyssey, one of the most epic stories ever told, one of the original epics, if you would, and it is the basis for many epic stories we have today. And it's, of course, been adapted numerous times in the thousands of years since it's been published or documented to have first been published, as these stories, Homer's Iliad and Odyssey, were stories told orally. They were spoken aloud before someone eventually wrote them down and credited them to Homer. So this being the latest film from Christopher Nolan, this is something that he has now veered into with fantasy that he hasn't done before, as he's mostly known and famous for doing grounded, more realistic interpretations of stuff, even if he goes into sci-fi or anything else like that. But again, he was really the only two words I needed to go ahead and be anticipating this movie ever since it was announced a couple of years ago, and I have been waiting with bated breath to see this movie, and I have finally gotten the opportunity earlier today to do so. So, starting out with the cast and their performances, we have Matt Damon as Odysseus. Now, he's an actor I've always quite enjoyed, and this film probably shows one of, if not his very best performance here. I think with all of the humanity that is associated with this character and what he is carrying, just to try and get home. But this movie's also a reflection, not too dissimilar to Oppenheimer, on how he has done so much wrong, and just so much on his very long journey home. It took him 10 years to fight in the Trojan War and 10 years to get home after that. And he has a lot of remorse, he has a lot of feelings, and so much else that make him try to go ahead and power through all of this with all the humanity and strength that he has. So much of it, like so much humanity and empathy and sympathy, whatever you could feel for a character like this, even though, of course, this is fantasy and all of this being put together. But Damon really puts in quite a performance here that should give him so much recognition, and him being in the prime of his career right now, showing off what he is doing as an actor. I mean, I just absolutely loved what he did here. One of my favorite film performances of the year so far. And there's a stacked ensemble in this movie. There are almost too many people to name, whether they have very prominent roles or not. So I'll try my best to remember who stood out to me the most and who else is in this film, just for many attributes and praise that I have to give, because I think this is an excellent ensemble. We have Anne Hathaway as Odysseus' wife, Penelope, who we mostly see in the sequences back at the palace of Odysseus, who is praying to the gods, of course, to have him come home safe, but also has her own things that she's expressing with all the other characters. I always loved Anne Hathaway, so seeing her work with Nolan again, I think gives her a strong performance. She's having quite a year for movies already and will continue to do so after The Devil Wears Prada 2 earlier this year, and now here with the Odyssey. I think she is showing off why, yeah, she is one of the actresses of her generation here. She especially has one scene towards the end that shows off a lot of why I think that her range as an actress is very praiseworthy. Tom Holland plays Telemachus, the son of Odysseus and Penelope. This is his most mature role to date, and though sparingly compared to other actors in the movie, we mostly see him back at the palace like with his mom. I think this is a role that shows off how much he has grown as an actor. Of course, we all know and love him as Spider-Man, but seeing him in a role outside of that for once, just to see what he is able to do here and the role that was given, I think this is something that should be showing off that once he moves past Spider-Man eventually, I think that he is someone that really is someone of a true talent of his generation as well, too, compared to all of the other heavy hitters that are here. Robert Pattinson plays Antinous, who is the lead suitor among the dozens of suitors that have taken over Odysseus' palace to try and marry Penelope, even though she's very dedicated to her husband, whom she doesn't know is alive or not. He is a very conniving kind of villain, very slithering, if you would. You really want to punch him in the face the entire time, because he's the one who obviously wants to get in with Penelope and just have all of this end together, with the whole time that him and the other suitors have been just living and squatting in the palace of Odysseus. I mean, Pattinson is an actor who I've come to really love and respect over the years, especially recently. This year, he's having quite a year already. Earlier this year, he was in The Drama, which is upside down. Here we go. The Drama, which, as you can see with the shrink wrap still being on this Blu-ray copy, I just got this in today. I really like this movie from earlier this year, also co-starring Zendaya, which I'll mention her, I should say, in a second. I thought he had a very vulnerable role in this film, but in playing this villain character in the Odyssey, he is like basically a total opposite of what he did in playing Charlie in The Drama. So I think that shows off how he is giving one of his most standout performances here as well too. Zendaya, who I'll mention now, she plays Athena. She is the goddess who protects Odysseus throughout his journey. Very limited screen time as well too, but I think her presence really has a warmth to it and is showing a lot of humanity, even though her character is also one of the ones that is on the more mythical side, and a lot of it in the pigment of Odysseus' imagination. Then there's John Leguizamo as Eumaeus. I believe that's how his character's name is pronounced. I apologize if I butchered that. He is the blind, loyal servant to the palace of Odysseus, and I think he gives one of his standout performances that I've ever seen from him. This could be seen as a role that is more supporting and in the background, but he has moments here that are also like words of wisdom, kind of like how you would say that the original author this text is credited to, Homer, is projecting himself into this story as it's been told numerous times and just showing what he is doing. I think with anything, a role big or small, like we say in the theater, there are no small parts, only small actors, if you would. This applies to movies as well, especially with the ensemble that has been assembled. Leguizamo, I think, really stood out. There's also Lupita Nyong'o as Helen of Troy. She also plays her sister here. Very limited screen time as well, but I think she did well with the role here. She was the catalyst for the whole Trojan War in the first place. And there's so many other people to mention here. I know I'm blanking on a lot of people's names or the characters because there's so many here. There's also Charlize Theron as Calypso, who is the sea nymph who Odysseus is with for a good chunk of his time and trying to get back home here. I mean, her presence is very regal and fits the whole time period that is being portrayed across this film. There's also John Bernthal, Benny Safdie as Agamemnon, and so many other people here that I have to just give my flowers to everyone in the ensemble cast, whether they have really prominent roles or not, whether it's back at the palace, like Logan Marshall Green having a specific role, or with Odysseus on his journey home, like Himesh Patel as a second in command. So many people here. So many people. Everyone here gives among their best performances of their careers. And it's all a credit, of course, to Christopher Nolan. And this leads me into getting into the writing and directing by this man. Now, this is an adaptation of a story that has been told numerous times, as I mentioned earlier. I've personally never had to read this story or never had to read it in high school or school in general. Surprisingly, that wasn't in any of my curriculum in my time that I was in school. When I was a kid, I did see an episode of the cartoon Arthur from PBS that had a pretty decent interpretation of the Odyssey told by the character DW that hit on a lot of the big points that were covered in the main story with it. So I was familiar with that, and there have been so many other stories that are either tributes or being adjacent to the Odyssey that pretty much everyone knows the story by now. So a thousands-year-old story to be spoiled by anyone here, I mean, you could say that is something that is very trivial, but there are some things that are changed up around here, as this is based on a specific adaptation or interpretation of the story being adapted by Christopher Nolan, but of course all going back to Homer being the credited author here. There has been controversy, not just with casting, but also in how this movie is changing up stuff in terms of how the story is told. Now, given that this is an adaptation, it's expected that things are going to be changed or done with whatever in terms of what is going to be done and being told here with how Nolan sees things. And for the casting controversy, I mean, between certain names and other actors that I haven't mentioned, a lot of these characters did not actually exist. A lot of these characters are not real, and they're based in fantasy. So in any way, you could have cast whoever you wanted to be in this story. One standout that stood out in one scene and probably one of my favorite sequences in the film, Elliot Page has a really potent presence really early on and then later way into the story as well too, just as an example. And it was nice to see Page reunite with Christopher Nolan after Inception, but then also having everyone speak in English or in American accents, speaking English. Again, another interpretation of the story here. So with all of that just coming together, even to the core of what I would say, in that we never knew or even know if a guy named Homer actually existed. In pop culture, he's depicted as an old blind man, like I said earlier, akin to John Leguizamo's character. A lot of this is rooted in fantasy, even if the time period of ancient Greece is being portrayed here and actually did happen, going into the costumes and accuracy and all that stuff with that. But in any sense, back to what Christopher Nolan is doing at his core in telling the story of the Odyssey. He is telling it as he is seeing it to a very grounded and as practical as he would at that level, because when we see that there's a lot of mention of gods and goddesses, very few of them are actually shown or seen, but we still have the presence of it because this is a story that literally has a lot around it. And the movie expects you to have at least a passing knowledge of what happened with the Odyssey and the Iliad, as a lot of moments are flashback to the Trojan War, the Trojan horse sequence being very prevalent here. And even if you're not that familiar with the Odyssey, this is a story that one can easily understand as a man, a warrior, is trying to get home, and it takes him so long to get home, and there are people at home waiting for him and are still loyal and seeing what's going to happen if he does or does not show up. So with Nolan in his writing here, there's a lot of nuance here as well because of the theming and timing of the story as he's going about it. Now, he, of course, is telling this in a non-linear structure. He's very much known for that, going all the way back to his very first movie in his career with Following, and then, of course, with Memento right after that. He loves doing that. And at first, you would see how the movie's going in terms of that it jumps around a lot, but it's never disorienting because I feel that thematically it's rooted in how we are trying to have a sense of humanity and sympathy, at least for these characters. Or just in the sense of that this movie is so frenetic anyway because a lot is happening. It kind of fits the whole frenetic approach that Christopher Nolan has done for many movies. And trust me, when we get to technical elements here, it goes with that in spades. And all the big bullet points that are covered with the original epic story are put in here. Two in particular veer onto horror aspects that Christopher Nolan has really leaned into. I think they are full-fledged horror sequences, and they have to do with the Cyclops and Circe. Now, the Cyclops sequence sees Bill Irwin. I have to give him a shout out because he actually does perform as the Cyclops here, even though he was portrayed as a puppet with some visual effects and CGI put in. But that was terrifying because of how, if you know the original story, being trapped in a cave and Odysseus and his men trying to get out, even though it is blocked by a big rock, that had some tension for sure, and just how nasty it is to see the Cyclops pick up his men and just devour them, just very, very bluntly. And then the Circe sequence with Samantha Morton playing her, she honestly is probably one of the very, very true MVPs of this movie. She is portraying this character as someone who turns men into pigs, and it's a really big body horror transformation kind of thing where she literally turns men into pigs. And I think that also goes into how, with the sequence and how it ends or goes towards its end, it backs up a lot of the theming here as to trying to defy the gods or trying to be with the gods. Or in Odysseus' case, even with all that put together, he's just trying to get home, and he's reflecting on all of the bad that he's done as well too, as I mentioned earlier, not being that far off from what Nolan did with Oppenheimer just a few years ago, reflecting on it and showing how war really tears people up, even if we are trying to go for a purpose or anything else. But ultimately, we have to see each other for who we are, and that is what is shown with so many characters popping in and out of the frame here. Just, yeah, like I said, this movie's living and breathing so many characters. Other actors that I haven't mentioned that were in the background, like Corey Hawkins as one of the suitors, and Mia Goth as one of the servants back at the palace. I mean, so many people here. They really all have a role to play. And the parts that are in here with Nolan directing this thing, I mean, it's an understatement to say he directs the crap out of this movie. Everything is so focused. Everything is so locked in. Even when jumping around between different portions of the story, because it doesn't go in a straight linear narrative. Even when we flash back into moments of the Iliad, they work into weaving into the whole hero's journey, or just the journey of Odysseus trying to get home here, because it's not a straight up adaptation of both stories per se, mainly the Odyssey. But what Nolan uses in framing the Iliad around this and backing up the theming, especially by its end, it goes without saying that I think that he really keeps pushing the boundaries of storytelling and is doing it in a way that keeps it so riveting across the running time, veering into 3 hours. Oppenheimer was Nolan's longest movie to date before he did the Odyssey, and the Odyssey is slightly less lengthy as Oppenheimer, 2 hours and 50 something minutes, but never did I ever feel the running time. I was always into seeing what was going to happen and seeing what was going to be done with not just the interpretation of the story, but also just with the filmmaking that is involved here, which leads me to the technical elements of this film. A lot of the same Oscar-winning crew from Oppenheimer do return here behind the camera, including cinematographer Hoyt van Hoytema. A lot has been said with this movie being the first film completely shot in IMAX, and we're talking the true IMAX aspect ratio that is close to 4:3 here. Now, I didn't see this movie in IMAX, but I saw it in a Dolby Cinema, and the entire screen was filled up the entire time. It wasn't a two letterboxed or anything like that. No, the entire frame was completely filled in for the entire running time. And if you see this movie in IMAX or true IMAX, anything like that, the entire frame is going to be filled up, not changing as Nolan did for other movies. And that's mainly because of what he has done in being limited with the IMAX format previously. The Dark Knight was the first Hollywood film production to be shot with sequences in IMAX. And now the Odyssey is the first film to be shot 100% in IMAX. And I think that whether you see this thing in that format or not, like I did, at least for this first showing, it's so gorgeous. It is so crisp to see everything up on the screen. Many moments have it be dark on purpose, like as in we're in the same cold or depths of darkness we are with Odysseus and the rest of his men. And how we see everything into view, it is just so engrossing just to be involved with this time gone by. And you see that also with many of the costume design choices and the production design, all the sets and the art direction. Now, I'm not going to go into historical accuracy or anything else like that too, because of course it's a time period that is being portrayed with ancient Greece, but how everything is just so immaculately put together. That is what I was focusing on here, even down to the boats that were created and actually sailing on water through the ocean. I mean, it looked like everything was done so for real, and Nolan's commitment to practicality is in full force here. It's on full display, and like I said earlier with the whole Cyclops sequence, it was done practically with a puppet, but visual effects are sprinkled throughout this movie. Whether we notice them or not, they are seamless into what we are seeing here because of how it is rooted in that whole idea of doing everything in camera or practically, or mostly everything you could possibly do. Even with the sound design, as I mentioned, I saw this thing in a Dolby Cinema, and it is quite loud in many moments, also mixed in with the score by Ludwig Göransson. Just give him his 4th Academy Award already. He previously won the Academy Award for Oppenheimer in working with Christopher Nolan, and then just earlier this year, he won again for Sinners. So he'll win for a couple of years in a row because he used instruments that are kind of similar or actually from the area in which this movie is taking place. Not a full-on orchestra, at least from what I was hearing. A lot of instruments with a lot of booming drums. There are some softer, more somber kind of moments here too with the score, but then also just booming bass and just a lot of electronic stuff that is mixed in here that have a lot of variety in what you are listening to, whether in the action sequences or even in some of the tender moments between characters one-to-one. And with those action sequences, all of them are filmed so just so immersively. Whether you're seeing the Cyclops sequence, as I said, or if you're seeing just Odysseus and his men running, or just going against these big giants in a wood sequence, or even on the high seas, they are all so engrossing, and you see them from afar in many instances, but also very up close when we get to see a lot of casualties going on. Because unless you don't know the story by now, you know not everyone is going to make it out of this. And so many other technical elements to mention here. The way it is cut together with the editing. Jennifer Lame is the editor here, and she had a lot of footage to work with, clearly, in trying to whittle this down to under 3 hours. Also because you cannot have a movie be shown in IMAX and have it be more than 3 hours. So that is a challenge in itself right there. But again, I thought the pacing was just so well executed. The way the movie is timed all together with it being just under 3 hours, and all other stuff you can mention with the technical elements here that I haven't even mentioned, and there's a lot to just go in here, but I'm running so far into time here. I'm like literally over 23 minutes into this video talking nonstop in one take, but so much put on display and so much put in centering and going back into the third act here. That is when I could say I did feel the running time, because after a certain point, again, without spoiling anything in case you don't know the Odyssey, I knew we were in like the final act or the final 40 to 45 minutes here. And that is when the movie really goes for it. It doesn't pull its punches thematically and also physically with a huge action sequence. And it really goes to a super satisfying degree in how it ends on so many levels. And again, backing up a lot of the themes of humanity and so many things that are put in here. So many things, so many things. I could repeat that for all that I could say because I was absolutely gobsmacked by this movie. Like Nolan has done before, creating masterpiece after masterpiece, I think this is Christopher Nolan's newest masterpiece. It is a riotous retelling of the epic, the titular epic of the Odyssey, in it being the original story for many stories to come later on, and it being reminiscent of cinema that we have seen of epic proportions from decades ago. This film goes for it, and it backs up as to why I love cinema. Many people have said this already before, but I'll say it again. But this is why we go to the movies. And Christopher Nolan doing this on such a gargantuan scale that has gotten everyone so excited and hyped up to see this movie. Well, not everyone, but I'll say those that are excited and have already been loyal fans of his for years or even decades. This is something that I think anyone who watches this, no matter who you are in terms of your background or familiarity with the Odyssey, you will get something out of it, and you'll be treated to cinema as it's supposed to be. Those that have gone into this thing already wanting to hate it, or all the controversy being over them and just taking over what they are seeing later on, I don't know what they'll think if they come out of this still with their minds made up or whatever. But this film really is the definition of being epic. And I'm going to see this thing more than once. In fact, I'm already planning on seeing this thing again. I already have tickets to see it in IMAX 70mm this coming Friday, which I will be documenting, and I will be seeing it with my cousin and his son, who I saw this movie with today earlier. Shout out to you, Alex, little Alex, and Alice, as here on the screen here, she took a picture of me taking the picture of me showing that I was going to see this thing on my Instagram story, and then she posted herself on her Instagram story as well too, clearly showing that she loved it as well. Every one of us was so into this movie from start to finish. And again, I'm going to be seeing this thing in IMAX 70mm this coming Friday. And I'm so excited because this is the way the movie was filmed and was meant to be seen by Christopher Nolan himself. And there's only one theater. This is the one theater in my state of Illinois that is showing this in the proper format. So yeah, there's so few theaters around the world, only a few dozen, and most of them here in the United States that are showing it. But if you're going to see this thing anyway, see it on the biggest screen you possibly can. IMAX 70mm is going to be quite an experience, I imagine, and I will be documenting that, and that will be my next video after this review for the Odyssey. So, yeah, if you couldn't already tell, I'm at a loss for words in many instances, and I'm repeating a lot of what I have said across this video. This video is veering towards a half hour, so I should just wrap this up in any sense. And yeah, it's late. I was out all day, and I'm just now recording this review just to get my thoughts up for everyone to see. Is this my favorite Christopher Nolan movie? I'm going to say that I think that his magnum opus remains to be Oppenheimer, as I declared in my review for that film. And my favorite movie of his personally, difference between favorite and best, I think his best, objectively, his best movie, I think, is Oppenheimer at this point. But my favorite remains to be The Dark Knight because of how that changed my love and perception for cinema for the better. But what he does here is continues to show why he is the filmmaker that he is and why so many of us herald and praise him and are really wanting to see anything that he does here. He said that he is not going to have another movie be out from him for at least 3 years, which I understand. We had 3 years in between this and Oppenheimer. But whatever he does and everything else that he continues to do, I want to thank him as if he's watching this video and showing that the Odyssey really is a story that has been retold for modern audiences, for anyone watching this, even into the future. This is cinema at its peak. And not only is this my favorite movie of 2026 thus far, it is also one of my favorite movies of the decade, and I look forward to multiple rewatches and further viewings to see what else I can get out of it, but also because I love movies. With all of that being said, my final verdict for the Odyssey is 5 out of 5 stars. Thank you all, as always, for watching. Be sure to like this video, comment on what you thought of the Odyssey. Social media links in the description. Subscribe to my channel for more, and I'll catch you on the next movie review.